Okay, welcome to the September 13th Wareham Planning Board meeting. I'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Roll call, Mr. King, Mr. Baptiste, Mr. Corbett, Mr. Schultz, Town Engineer Consultant Charlie Rowley, and Director of Planning, Mr. Buckland, and myself, Mr. Swenson. As I'm going to be my habit, I'm going to introduce this board as the Wareham Planning Board, which is a land use board whose primary purpose is to provide for the orderly growth and development of our town. We will administer and oversee the land use projects that fall under the jurisdiction of this board with three primary objectives: ensuring the public safety, interest, and welfare of our citizens, proper application of state and local laws, regulations, and procedures regarding land use, and safeguard the land use rights of Wareham property owners. These laws I refer to are the Wareham bylaws, the Wareham zoning laws, the zoning act, the Wareham zoning bylaws, the Wareham rules and regulations governing subdivision, and then Massachusetts General Laws 40A, which is known as the Zoning Act, and Chapter 41, which has subdivision control law in the Mass General Laws. So other things we do is consider and prepare amendments to the zoning laws of our town, and we develop and maintain the master plan. We're anxious to work with all citizens in our town as we evolve, and we encourage our citizens to become familiar with our laws, regulations, and procedures to help us manage that orderly growth. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
A request and/or a motion if required. I would like the text of that statement included in the minutes as an attachment, or it's an important piece of communication. So I don't know if we need a motion or just a plain request.
Consider it done. All right?
Thank you. I think it's useful. I'm glad that we're doing it. And I know we're going to do some other things to improve communications.
I'm assuming that you want this in all minutes or just one time? It's cut and paste.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's just an attachment
Okay.
for all times. I think it's helpful.
Okay, moving on. Minutes to approve. We have minutes from August 23rd, 2021. I've reviewed them. Didn't have any issues. Anyone have any comments?
I did. Two comments. One, I did send an email out to everyone on the board requesting that the text of your statement was attached to these minutes. And the minutes actually in the heading say agenda. It says agenda, not minutes.
Oh, on the minutes document. Nice
Yes.
catch. We'll fix that, okay? So we'll carry that over. Any other issues?
Other than those two requests, they're
Okay.
fine.
So we need to change the header to minutes and include the intro text. All right. Preliminary business. Endorsement of approved plans for Bay Point Phases 2 and 3, definitive subdivision and special permit. It's my observation that this is a cleanup, the last dotting of the I and crossing of the T's. Charlie, you've reviewed this, and you reported at our last workshop that everything looked good.
Yeah, as far as the plans are concerned, yes, I haven't seen the covenant.
And Mr. Buckland, there is a requirement for a covenant, I believe.
You should have the covenant in your folders.
I still want to know how Carl caught the minutes agenda thing.
Mr. Buckland, I have a question. What is the purpose and function of a covenant?
Oh, we're going to have to defer them anyway, because they're wrong. I don't think we need a motion.
Approve them with
We could.
I'm okay with doing that as well. I make a motion that we approve the minutes of 8:23, amending the heading to say minutes as opposed to agenda, and to attach the text of Mr. Swanson's statement, and then we approve that on that condition.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Corbett?
Aye.
Mr. Baptiste? Mr. King?
Aye.
And Mr. Swenson votes aye. Okay. Backing up, now moving back forward again. We're back to the covenant. The covenant is in our folder. I think we need to take a couple minutes and look at this. I don't have a lot of experience personally with these, and I don't know what to look at, so.
So, the purpose of the covenant is to ensure that the utilities and the boat and all the other improvements in the subdivision are made prior to the release of lots in the subdivision. So they have to build all the access and supporting infrastructure before lots may be released. If they want to release lots in a later time when they haven't finished all the work, they can provide a bond of some surety in place of the covenant that ensures that the work will be done at the subdivision prior to any further release of lots. And you can do partial release and a full release of lots.
Do they have to come back to the board for that approval?
Yes, they do. They have to come back for any change in that, in the agreement that's made.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Swain, I have another question, Mr. We did get a copy of a letter from the association, which had a lot of conditions. None of those conditions are applicable to the covenant, right?
You may, did you see, he may not have seen that.
I thought he forwarded sewer covers and,
The homeowners association sent a letter to Tim Fay regarding some issues they were having with him, and copied the planning board on it. And I read it, and I understand their issues, they're legitimate issues, but I don't think they have anything to do with the planning board.
that was my question. That was my question, so, okay, thank you.
Although you do, in many cases, you do review the homeowners association documents to ensure that the maintenance of the subdivision road is done according to the plan. It's a separate document from the permits that you provide as the plan board.
So, Mr. Buckland, to read this back to you in my words, the covenant is a promise to complete the project per the terms and conditions of the permit. And there's no bond or surety provided with that. And the assumption is that no transfer of property will occur until the thing is entirely done.
That's correct.
And then if they wanted to phase it out, they'd have to come back, post a bond to say, I promise I'll do the rest of the stuff, and we can approve or disapprove or negotiate that as we see fit. Okay. Charlie, you see any issues with this covenant?
Yeah, a couple.
Would you mind sharing those with us?
Item 3C
Has no
on the
date.
first page. There needs to be a date for that certificate of approval and when it was filed with the town clerk. And I'm not sure of the language on item 4, where it says particular lots within the subdivision shall be released from the foregoing by the planning board and enumerated the specific lots to be released. That only happens upon final completion of the roads or the security by other means, such as a bond or cash bond or whatever they put in its place. So I'm not sure that it's appropriate to simply state without condition or without specification that the planning board shall release the lots from this.
It seems counter to what Mr. Buckland told us the purpose of the document is.
Exactly counter to it. That may not have been the intent, but the language needs to be modified, I think, to make that clearer.
And then going forward, there's no date on item 9.
Number 4 appears to be something that would be in for a phased release of the lots.
No, not necessarily.
What is it trying to say?
Well, I think it should say that the planning board shall release the lots upon the full inspection, completion, and approval of the construction of the roads and all of the utilities in it. Or, in exchange for this document, sufficient security that covers the construction in such a way that the town is protected. So it has to be in one of three forms that are specified in the subdivision rules and regulations. And you just don't say that it is released from the foregoing.
Mr. Buckland, any comment?
I agree with Charlie.
I'm sorry?
I agree with Charlie.
Okay. There are several blanks, as Mr. Rowley identified on 3C, the bottom of page 2, item 3.9. So, Mr. Buckland, can you go back to Mr. Fay and work with him and address these issues? Or is that something that this board should do directly?
Ken, can you use number 2? Second, next mic over.
I'm contacted the owner of that plan, get the change made.
Okay. That's a great answer.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to confirm, and it'll take me a second to find it in the rules and regulations, but I think what needs to be inserted in number 9 on page 2 is 2 years.
It is 2 years.
That's been what it's consistently been, but it's also subject to a request from the applicant to come in and extend that for good purpose or good reason, so I'll try and find the paragraph where that is for you.
Okay. We will sign and approve the plan. We haven't signed and approved the plans, have we?
No, you're not.
Until you're
keep-
satisfied with this.
Right,
you
we'll
don't
keep
sign.
that open and do this all at once.
That's right.
All right.
So, Mr. Swenson, I make a motion that we continue this project till the next meeting, pending,
You don't need
Corrections?
to continue.
oh, we don't need to continue?
No, you don't.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Any other comments or discussions on the Bay Point Phase 2 and 3? All right, let's move on to the Rain Car Wash. This is for the public, this is a site plan review being conducted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Part of the process for site plan review is to reach out to other government entities within the town and get their feedback, and one of them is the planning board. We have looked at these plans for the last 3 weeks, or had these plans available to us for the last 3 weeks. We discussed it before. Tonight we can provide our comments if we care to. I'll begin, if that's okay. In looking at the pictures for it, I had a lot of concern about what I would call a futuristic design. That may be a little harsh, but it's a very, very modern, bold and shiny and chrome design. And then I revisited driving down Cranberry Highway, many times that I do, and I cannot honestly say that Cranberry Highway has a New England culture as I drive down past Wendy's and McDonald's and Midas and everything like that. And I've decided that I will have no comment back to the ZBA on their style. And in terms of the rest of it, it looked fine to me. So Anybody else want to go? Mr. Schultz?
Okay, first question or statement I have is on the impact statement that they prepared. The document, their impact statement says it was prepared referencing the May 2014 zoning bylaws. That seems inappropriate.
How does he catch this stuff?
Because I read what they... I have to find it. I have it online, but I don't have...
They reference the 2014 zoning bylaws?
Yes, May 2014 zoning bylaws. It was in the impact statement from the engineering firm.
Well, that's something we should let him know.
I can't find the impact statement in this
I think
package.
that's okay. That's for them to deal with, but it's a great observation.
Okay. The next comment. Again, my concern is we're being asked to comment on plans and documents that are incomplete. Based on Mr. Rowley's assessment, there are significant changes and updates that need to be made to the plans. So any comment that I make is predicated on the fact that they make the adjustments and corrections that Mr. Rowley recommends. So again, I think we're out of, well, that's my comment, that those updates and changes have to be made, and I don't know whether that means we get another chance to comment or not. Next, Mr. Rowley pointed out that there's the plans are predicated on an A&R that needs to come before this board. I don't know that that A&R hearing is scheduled.
I don't believe it is.
We've received no A&R for the properties yet, but I think they're gonna wait till they see it for the entitlement before they finalize the subdivision.
Okay, so again, we're commenting sort of out of order. There's also a requirement for the Conservation Commission to comment, and I have no idea. I would like to know what their comments are. Not that it's...
Can I make a comment? I'm wondering, I just want to comment. You and I seem to be approaching this task from a different perspectives, and I'm not saying yours is wrong or mine is right, or mine is wrong and yours is right, I don't know. But there are many things that have to go on. There are many adjustments that will be made and negotiated. I looked at it from the point of view, did I see anything that I wanted specifically to identify that they do focus on as they do that?
I didn't get that far yet, but...
Oh, okay,
Yes.
all right.
But if we're... But yes, I thought we were asked to review and comment on this. These are...
What I thought I heard you saying, Carl, is that you wanted to see the Conservation Commission report.
Well, yes, and I understand that that's not necessary. What you and I have talked about, and we've talked about in general, is the whole process from moving projects through the town relies on multiple boards and committees and to act on the plans. And right now, and by law, those boards and committees act independently. I think one of the goals in the master plan is that we should work more closely together. And so that was the spirit behind my comment. That in order to create a design aesthetic to meet the goals that you said for land use that consider both the developers and the citizens, I hope that we can find a way to work more closely together. So that was the spirit behind that statement. Just other comments. Again, reading Mr. Rowley's review, he questioned or noted that there are relevant conditions and restrictions from previous approvals and variances that impact the project, and I just don't know what they are. And they're not readily easy they may be readily available, I just couldn't find them.
Access may not be there. I get it.
Right, or they may be there and I just didn't know how to find them. Okay, and then, probably out of order, but I also reviewed this against the master plan. And the first comment that I made against the master plan was very similar to your comment, is that the design aesthetic of this project, very futuristic, your words, is inconsistent with the look and feel of what's there now. However, I'm not advocating that what's there now is something that should be our goal state. So the statement that I came at is in the master plan, there is land use strategy 3, which says there should be design guidelines for commercial development in certain areas. And it really, this project points out the need for action on that strategy. Because we really don't have, I mean, the master plan said we should develop those design guidelines. And without those design guidelines in the master plan, saying that it doesn't meet a design aesthetic, it doesn't give that Cape Cod look and feel. Well, you're right, but there's nothing that says it's supposed to either. So that's more our problem than the developer's problem.
I agree.
The other thing, master plan transportation goal 1, strategies 2 and 3, congestion and traffic studies. I was speaking to Mr. Rowley. He believes that the traffic studies are complete, so I think we've covered that goal. And it seems consistent with land use goal 3 to implement the future land use map, because that section is bright red. And so those are my comments, none of which, other than Mr. Rowley's comments, which is the zoning board's problem, or not problem, but issue to deal with, I have no reason that
Okay.
it can't go forward.
You want to try to follow up? You trying to follow that one, Sam?
No? My only problem is there are too many changes to be made before we look at it. I mean, there's a list of changes.
So we're being asked for comment too early.
Agreed.
We should comment on a more final product.
Yeah, there's too many changes and problems in it right now.
We're in a catch-22 here a little bit. Mr. Baptiste, any comments?
I think the building is
I'm sorry?
the building is terrible. You know, this isn't Las Vegas. Another concern I would have is, car washes have a tendency of attracting a lot of wet water.
Mike,
A lot of wet water into the streets. And the thing is, what are you gonna do in the wintertime? That's a low spot as it is at 28. As it, we know it floods as it rains now. With the new construction, I don't know if that's gonna improve it or not. I think that's something we should look at real close.
So I'm making a note, must have provisions for water management off the premises. Does that address it okay?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Mr. Rowley clearly pointed that out in his comments.
it's always flooded there.
Mr. King?
I think the sentiment about the design of the building is what I have the biggest issue with.
Okay.
I don't agree that Route 28 is the most attractive corridor right now. And if we're gonna continue to work to enhance, you know, Wareham as far as a village, this design doesn't add to that.
Okay. I've made note of all the comments. I will summarize them. I will distribute them individually with individual emails to each of you to avoid any open meeting law issues. And if you guys would then take a look at that and get back to me with any notes or comments, we'll provide that to Ken as our document. Does that work, Ken?
Yes, it does.
Okay. This is for me. All right. Any more discussion on the rain car wash? Okay. moving on. Let's see, anything interesting on the agenda next? That's Fearing Hill Road Solar. Okay. So, Mr. Buckland has been in contact with Mr. Shanahan, and this is Rich. Rich, I'm not going to try to say your name. Tabazinski, how's that?
Perfect.
All right, Rich Tabazinski from Atlantic Design. I consider you the engineer on this project. Is that okay?
That is correct.
Mr. Shanahan is working another project in New York State right now, and Rich is here to address a list of issues that this board has shared with the applicant. I'll go quickly through what those are so people know what's going on, but I just want to remind the citizens of Wareham that this is a continued public hearing. The applicant is here to present to this board. This board will then have the opportunity for each member to ask questions or comment on what is presented tonight. We will ask our consulting town engineer the same. We will ask our director of planning the same. Once all that dialogue is completed, we will open up the public hearing to the general public and ask people to attend. I would need to comment right now on our Zoom setup. We got here very early tonight before the meeting, and we've tried several different configurations to make this work. The video works fine. We've tried many different configurations here for the audio, and every one we've tried using tests within this room result in a lot of echo and feedback. And we don't know how to correct that. We've tried everything we can think of. There is a chance, but I think it's doubtful, that someone trying to speak remotely into the Zoom from outside this building may have more luck. We're gonna try when we get there, but I want to warn you now. We've tried to hardwire right into the mic mixer. We've tried a remote speaker. We've tried a second remote speaker. We've tried multiple laptops. We can hear, but there's feedback and echo. So, not sure how that's going to go. Anyway, that being said, when we do get to the public hearing part, people will be invited up to speak. You were invited to comment to this board. You'll have 3 minutes to talk. If you have pertinent information that takes you past 3 minutes, I will be more than happy to extend an extension, but that precludes you have new and important information that we need to hear. Any questions that people have will be directed to the chair. The chair will evaluate the question, determine if it's valid for what we're trying to accomplish, and see if there's someone in the audience or within the applicant's party who is willing to address the question at that time. The reason I bring this up is I do not want to have a debate between myself and the public, a debate between the public and the applicant. The reasons we have these procedures is to manage the meeting properly. Rest assured, I want to hear your input, and this board wants to hear your input, as long as it's good, valid input that we haven't heard before and it's meaningful. So, trust me, I'm not trying to limit you because I don't want to hear it. I'm trying to limit extraneous information or duplicate information so we can keep the meeting moving along. That's my goal. So, that being said, we have several questions to the applicant. We wanted to talk about the requirement for tree inventory. We wanted to talk about sight lines. We wanted to talk about a waiver for buffer setbacks being updated in the plan. We wanted to talk about revising the plans to reduce to 1 utility pole. A decision requiring the replacement of the cul-de-sac with a wandering lane and plan updates. Applicant to submit letter requesting for continuance. This is a procedural thing that we want to do every meeting to be above board and legal about how we continue our public hearings. We want to talk about ancient ways. We want to talk about noise specifications and how they line up with state law and regulations. That's on the agenda for tonight. What's not on the agenda tonight is the hydrogeologist. We are targeting right now 2 weeks from tonight when Mr. Shanahan and Mr. Neil, what's his last name?
Price,
Pardon me?
Price.
Price will be here from the hydrogeology firm to discuss the proposal. Comments, questions? Good?
Sounds good.
When does this continue to?
That's a question I have on my list for later.
Just want to make sure we have enough time.
Yeah. You have can you help us there, Ken?
Yeah, as a special permit, you have 90 days after the close of the public hearing to make a decision. So you've got time as long as the public hearing is open.
But how long, and there is no limit on how long we can keep the public hearing open.
No, not as long as you get continual agreement with the applicant that the time should be continued.
And we should start insisting on that now.
Correct.
But we have, at the beginning, we asked for that as well.
Right. So every meeting, we're going to ask the applicant to request a continuation. That can go on indefinitely. Once we close,
It has to be to a date certain.
Say again?
It has to be to a date certain each time you continue the hearing.
Continue to a certain date.
Yeah, so tonight we'll continue to the 27th.
Okay.
In the list of items that you talked about on the agenda for tonight, did you talk about sightlines? I didn't hear sightlines.
Yes.
Okay, sightlines are important for tonight.
Big one tonight. So, Rich, it's my understanding you're prepared to talk to all of those issues tonight.
Yes, yes, I am, yep.
Right. And can you do me a favor and position that so the audience over here can see it? And as well, Mr. King, to the best of his ability, let's just try to find a balance there.
That's good.
Is that okay, Michael?
Yep. That'd be fine.
All right.
I request a telescope.
All right, so what would you like to start with? I'll let you pick and choose as you wish.
Well, while I have the board up, I guess I can discuss some revised drawings that we have for you to just to look at, as well as the revised or the updated cross-sections, the sightline cross-sections. I have a bunch of hard copies here to submit officially, I guess, to the board. I can do that now. There's 6 copies of each. So this is the revised site.
I don't
Thank
know.
you.
I don't know what the right this is. I'm okay, Ken, I have some right here. You printed them out.
I don't have a revised one.
Printed out your own, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ken, if you got an extra one, can we set it on that table flat there so that any member of the audience wants to look at it can go up and see it? Would that be all right?
So the revised plans that you have in front of you were submitted electronically to Ken last week, and they're a work in progress. They're not considered final plans for you to vote on or approve at this point. We just wanted to give you an update to highlight some of the changes we have made. And those relate to the waiver requests that we had originally. If you remember, when the original application was submitted, we had a waiver request relative to first of all, showing trees 18 inches or greater in diameter on the plans. The second waiver that we requested was to allow some clearing and grading within the 50-foot solar setback along all the property lines. So these plans here, we've officially requested, we sent a letter into Ken last week that officially withdrew the waiver of the 50-foot buffer, clearing and grading within the 50-foot setback. So that's been taken off the table as far as what the applicants were looking for. So these plans show that 50-foot setback from all property lines, whether there's residences or streets or conservation land, we're still holding the minimum 50-foot solar setback and keeping it in a natural state. There's no clearing, grading, or anything within that 50-foot line on these drawings. So we've pulled back the project limits, pulled back our stormwater basins, access roads, everything to meet that requirement. Secondly, the plans also show elimination of all the utility poles on Fairing Hill Road except for one new one. So there'll be basically one new pole installed on the project side, the north side of Fairing Hill Road. And from that point on, it'll be underground electric with just concrete, equipment pads, not utility poles going into the site. The third item that we've revised on the plans is the access road coming in off of Fairing Hill Road. As you know, that's in the location of where the subdivision cul-de-sac is proposed at this point. And with the understanding that the board may, in the future, waive construction of that pavement and 100-foot diameter cleared paved area, these plans anticipate that happening and show essentially just an access road coming in off of Fairing Hill Road just to serve this particular project. And it comes in and takes a turn to the right or to the east in order to not provide a clear path or clear sight line right from Fairing Hill directly into the site. It curves to the right, and that way there can be a natural buffer of trees left. If you happen to be standing in Fairing Hill Road and looking right into the access road, all you'll see is a dirt road or a gravel road extending into the property and curving off to the right with natural trees in front of you. So we feel that is a way of addressing one of the comments we heard at some of the meetings earlier.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
With the setback changes that you've incorporated to 50 feet, did the overall size of the farm get reduced at all?
Yes, it did. Yeah, the amount of cleared area, if you will, for the project was reduced by a little about 3.5 acres. It was 26.7 acres, and now it's just a little bit over 23 acres. So the net reduction in the amount of clearing on the site was over about 3.6 acres.
And panels?
The panel count, that's a good question. Let me just check that. That number here. So I guess I have numbers on the fenced-in area or the megawatts, if that helps.
I don't need to have it right now, but I guess I do want to know, did they get reduced?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, basically, for AC wattages, it went from 4.4 to about a little over 4 megawatts AC.
Okay. We can figure that out from the plan.
Yeah, and So it has been reduced in size, slightly reconfigured. We've also, while we were looking at the reduction in size of the project and clearing, Mr. Rowley had some comments on the configuration of the access road around the perimeter of the site. We've made some adjustments to, we believe, to address some of those comments also to provide better access around certain tight corners and other things that was mentioned in Mr. Rowley's letter. Obviously, there are other comments that Mr. Rowley has, but we were in the process of working on, but I just wanted to mention that we at least took a look at that one while we were revising the layout. We were able to do that one and accomplish that. The last item that these revised site plans have that you see is basically some landscaping and screening along the southern edge of the property. Basically, as a result of the other item we'll discuss, which is the sightline cross sections. After performing that exercise and completing those cross sections, we felt it was appropriate to provide some screening along the southern edge of the property, particularly for the residences along Faring Hill Road. And so that screening is shown on this set of site plans along that southern edge. So that's kind of the update on the site plans themselves. They're, again, a work in progress. We still need to address other comments from Mr. Rowley, but we're kind of waiting for the results and of the hydrogeological study and other aspects before we delve in and complete the entire set of drawings for you. So again, this is just kind of an updated interim set right now to discuss.
So that's a summary of the site of the existing plan changes that have been made, and as you mentioned, more to come. Any questions from board members? What I would like to propose is we go right to sightlines.
Agreed?
Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right.
Sure. Let's see.
Little background while Rich is setting up. Several members of this board with the applicant did a site visit and identified spots around the proposed site where the board felt sightline information was critical to have. You're looking at a map on the easel there where the long white lines are those locations. There's, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of them, I think, or about that. 12. So this week the board received the results of the work that was done, and I would ask you, Rich, to walk us through that.
Sure, and there are hard copies of the sightlines also that I submitted. But to run through the procedures and what we accomplished, as you had mentioned, Mr. Chairman, there was a site meeting and 12 locations were identified. And what we have prepared is 2 sets of drawings or sightline cross sections. One is a set of that show just as is conditions without any screening or plantings. And then the second set shows the difference, basically shows the same sections only with the proposed plantings in place. And so we did that in order to provide the board with the information of what it looks like if we don't do plantings and what it would look like, and show how those plantings are effectively screening the project. So that's why there's 2 sets of these that we're handing out or that we've submitted.
Thank you, sir.
Is there one for the table, Ken?
So if you look in the title block, in the lower right-hand corner of the site, of the plans, one of the sets will just say sight lines, section views or plan views, but then the other set will say that, but it'll also in parentheses say screened. And so the ones that say screened are the ones that have the plantings shown and the effectiveness of those on the sections.
Thank you.
Apologize if that's the case, but we felt it was helpful to show both versions, basically with and without the screening. So what you have is a set of drawings. The first drawing is an aerial view of the neighborhood or the area, showing the solar project in the center, and then identifying the different sight lines that we drew from the various residences that were picked on the site walk. And then going through the sheets themselves, this is essentially a cross-sectional view that shows from the resident's location, a section showing the existing topography, existing wooded areas or trees, and then the proposed facility, where there's either solar panels or transformer pads or anything else on the site, proposed fencing, and again, on the second view, there is proposed screening. So I can run through each and every one of these, but if you look on sheet 2, for instance, this is a section from 18 Island Brook Road.
Can I interrupt for a second? I don't know how to read the horizontal scale here. I don't know what 5 plus 50 means.
That is a horizontal distance. So where the sight line starts, which was at the residence that we're looking at, that's 0 plus 0, 0. And then each increment is labeled in 50 feet increments. So from the house on 18 Island Brook Road, if you look way to your right, it's about 1,400, maybe 1,500 feet before you actually, that's how far the development is away from that residence.
If I just took the plus sign out and said that's 1,500 feet?
Yes, basically that's it, yeah.
Okay.
It's the computer program that we use for these is generated as if it's like a road profile, so that's like road stationing. 0 plus 0, 0 plus 50. It's basically 50-foot increments that it's labeled as.
And the number above that, I believe, is the elevation?
That's the elevation of the existing topography, the existing grades that are out there.
Okay.
So as a, for instance, on 18 Island Brook Road, the house, the grade in front of the house is about elevation 36 and a half. And then as you can see, when you get to the site, at the very end or the very right-hand side, the elevations on the site are up in the 70s and 80s, elevation-wise. There's a big low area.
Everyone understand this?
No. So, just to clarify, if I were noted where a person's standing, my shoulder would be like this, and I would be looking this way across this plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I would be, my shoulder left to right, and then the cross-section is out in front of me.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And so for each of those locations, we measured the average tree height, either on the site or immediately in front of those particular houses, plotted those accurately to scale on this drawing, and drew basically a straight line from a person standing at that house, a straight line to the upper and lower edges of the panels. And that's the dark heavy line that's shown on that goes straight from the left to the right to the panels. And again, this is all done accurately to scale, and it's a representative of the existing grades, the existing trees, and what is being proposed on the site.
Mr. Swenson, another question on reading the plan. How can I see the 50-foot setback on the plan? Where do I see that? The buffer zone,
On each section, you'll notice a label that says property line.
correct? I see that?
So if 50 feet from that,
To the right.
To the
on
right.
On the sheet. So
yep, all of these are drawn from left to right, so
63, so 14, I'm trying to, 1,400 to 1,450. Okay, so those two lines, that's 50 feet. Okay, so from 14 plus 00 to 14 plus 50, that's the buffer zone,
That's-
approximately on the 18 Island Brook Road.
exactly.
Thank you. I'm just making sure I'm reading it correctly.
Nope, you got it right on, yep.
That looks like the easy one, Carl. Okay, which one you want to do next, Rich?
Well, I mean, so in going through these existing as-is sightline sections, we've found that the locations from Faring Hill Road, we had a concern of the understory not being, I guess, thick enough, and that would allow some of the views from in front of the houses on the other side of Faring Hill under, say, winter conditions when the understory is gone, essentially, that there might be an opportunity for a view underneath the tree canopy. We've looked at, the average tree canopy on a lot of the site, the branches were upwards of like 10 feet off the ground. So that allowed, because of the topography, allowed some, what we considered or were concerned might be a clear sight line to the project, even though there's a buffer of upwards 200, 300, 400 feet of trees. Because of the understory and the winter conditions and the topography, we did have some concerns that there might be some views underneath the tree canopy. So that's why, if you'll notice on the second set of plans, we proposed some plantings along the southern edge, which would basically block that potential view underneath the existing trees, particularly in the winter and when a lot of the understory is
94.
not vegetated as it is like right now.
Page
So,
six.
to be clear, though, I think it's important that we understand, for example, when we look at 18 Island Brook Road, it looks like there's a huge buffer there. But actually, the property line is at
Property line's right there.
about 1375.
I think it's gonna be right in their
The
backyard.
panels are at about 1575.
What about,
Right,
what
so
about from the bedroom
The
window?
buffer is only here, is what I'm saying. It's not this. It does exist, but
Yes.
assuming it, say again?
There's nothing there anyway.
Hold on.
Yeah. Sheet 6 is the same, 94 and
Yes.
95, Faring Hill is.
You can see, then you only have the buffer zone, and you don't have all that extra space, so it's a much greater impact.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna get there.
So, essentially, when we looked at these, we felt from Island Brook Road, the other houses along Helen Street, just didn't, because of the topography and vegetation that was there and the trees, that we felt there wasn't a need for screening in those locations. But on the southern side, again, just based on the topography and the sections that we did, we felt that there was a need along that southern line for some evergreen type screening in that area. Because as you can see during the sections, there's less vegetation there under current conditions.
But look at, if I may,
Yep.
Rich, if you look at sheet 3, 32 Helen Street. When I look at this and I think about vegetative visual screening, I cannot depend on existing 60-foot high trees that are on the abutting property to be there long-term. I look at this and I only look at 375 to 475, for example, as my guaranteed vegetative visual screen to that property. And I don't know if that makes sense to me. I can't
Well-
guarantee these trees here are gonna be there.
Well, if I could address that in partially, I guess. In some of the instances, there's, for instance, 28 Helen Street, which is on that same sheet, sheet 3.
Bottom right.
Yep. The trees that are shown there, that band of existing trees, that's all trees that are off of their property. Those are the trees that are within the railroad, the old abandoned railroad right-of-way. And then, so there's a property line that ownership, that residence owns. Then there's a band of land that's within that railroad right-of-way between those residences and the project. And so they wouldn't, I understand what you're saying. Every homeowner has a right to just, I guess, clear their entire property to their property lines, but they wouldn't be clearing, in this instance, up to the project's property line. There's still a band of natural vegetation that would occur, that would be still there, which is not their property. That's the abandoned railroad right-of-way.
And you're talking about 28 Helen Street?
Yeah, and it applies on all those. Essentially, every Helen Street property has a strip of land
On the
between
west
them.
side?
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't see it referenced here. I don't-
True, yeah, we did not identify that exactly in terms of where their property line ends versus the project property line. We just put the project property line in.
The property line that you do reference is the homeowner's property line or the railroad property line?
That's the project's property, the locus of the
Oh.
Fairing Hill. So we can add those lines in if that's if something that you would prefer to see. Because I understand your comments, yeah, that they have the right to clear some of those trees, so if they wanted to.
I think they have to go through a process as well. But, do you have anything more? I would like to open this up to board comments on sightlines when you're done with your presentation on sightlines.
No, that was basically it, yeah. Hopefully you can follow our process of what we did, and just, if you have questions, let me know.
Please.
Thank you for your presentation. So I understood, and you've helped me read the plans. Your sightlines were taken at 6 feet, and your vegetative screening, where proposed on the southern edge, was for that 6 feet sightline. And I know we didn't talk about multiple elevations on the sightline, but the presumption then would be second-story views will be sufficiently screened around because of the mature trees and the the limbs come down far enough and the leaves and such are dense enough so that you don't perceive that there will be a problem from the second story.
Yes, that is correct, yeah.
That was my only question, Mr. Swenson.
Mr. Corbett, any comments or questions?
I'm good.
Mr. King?
Just 90, I see 94 and 95 Fairing Hill Road being a real challenge.
Say again?
See 94 and 95 Fairing Hill Road on page 6.
94.
Being a real challenge. I don't know how you're gonna go about giving those people some relief from watching, looking at this project
That's on sheet 6 of 6 on the screened.
on the screen, yeah.
Yeah, there's almost nothing here.
And for reference, that is these are the bottom left properties. Excuse me, bottom right. The bottom right are 89, 88, 94, and 95. Mr. King is referencing 94 and 95, which has minimal existing tree vegetation, visual buffers, a proposed vegetative screening addition on both of those.
What, I didn't see anything that represented what was gonna be used. Do you
So
have-
as far as the plantings, I
Yeah.
mean, we would anticipate obviously an evergreen, trees on other projects. We've looked at, an arborvitae row. Typically, a green giant arborvitae is what we've proposed. It's deer resistant and grows fast, grows fairly tall.
And would there be anything in, would we be in a position to put anything in the project notes that made provisions for maintenance, for dieback and things of that nature? I mean, you plant them and 3 years later, you know, I've seen arborvitae just get decimated in a bad winter. Now,
Sure.
all of a sudden, you've got no screening.
I'm sorry, how tall?
Well, I mean, typical plantings come in at like a 6-foot height. Arborvitae, from my understanding, grow like 3 feet a year sometimes.
So Mr. King is recommending that in the special permit, we outline requirements around regularly repeated maintenance to
Of the screening.
to any new screening put in, so we don't get in a situation like down on Toby Road with, right?
Correct. I mean, it's not ideal. I mean, the better fix would be obviously to take 2 or 3 rows of panels out to provide for more screening.
The ultimate solution is to go with solar farm, period. We're in the process now, what we're doing now is, what are we, redesigning the solar field for the client?
Well, no, I wouldn't call it redesigning for the client. I'd call it trying to protect the neighbors that are gonna be forced to live with it if in fact it does pass muster.
So one of the things I'm looking at very closely, Rich, is the physical buffer with vegetation. And I go through like on, and what I'd like to do is walk through my thought process with you, make sure I got it right. So if we look at 18 Island Brook Road, from the property line to where the clearing would be, that appears to go from about 1375 to about 1425. 1460 or so. Help me there.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a 50-foot area that's that will remain natural.
So that's a 50-foot natural vegetative buffer. And let's go ahead and let's look at a couple other ones. Let's look at 24 Helen Street. The property line appears to be at about 370.
Yep.
The buffer to the panels goes out to 475, but I'll call that 370. But the edge of the vegetation appears to be about 390.
Which,
But 24 Helen Street, and
Yep.
I'm going from the property line right to the edge of the trees. That appears to be about 30 feet. Grant, now, that's just where the trees are.
yeah, I mean, the trees are drawn as a symbol, I guess, but that does represent that there's a 50-foot buffer there.
There is a buffer, but most of it's, would you agree, is wide open?
From the property line to the clearing would still remain, that 50-foot area.
I guess my question to some experts here on our zoning bylaw, when we talk about a 50-foot buffer, on 24 Helen Street, that's from the property line to the security fence, which appears to be 25, 50, 75 feet. Are we all reading this the same way?
Mhm.
However, the area of that 75 feet that actually has visual blockage in terms of trees would appear to be 30 to 40 feet, based on the drawing here.
If I could just jump in a little bit, I guess the reason it's a little bit off in these sections is these sections aren't taken at exact right angles to the property line.
I understand.
So you'll see it skews what you're seeing in the section view, because along the line of the sight line, it's either longer or shorter than the 50 feet, you know what I mean?
Mr. Baptiste, do you have any comments? Mr. Rowley, do you have any comments?
I don't have any real comments on the buffers at this point. My reason being is related to the actual site conditions. And it's more than just sight line that I'm concerned with. And as I put into my report, it was my feeling that because of soil conditions and the potential for high groundwater, that the best way to attenuate that is to allow the natural vegetation to consist or to stay there in areas where it's most important. So until we see what the results of the study are and the information that's presented to date with respect to the groundwater, soil conditions, what happens when you strip the top, I think that saying too much about these actual sight lines is maybe a little bit premature. The only thing I would say is that on that proposed arborvitae line, certainly a single row is not necessarily the best. That it should be doubled and maybe tripled with the line of sight staggered, so that you're looking through not just one tree, but a series of trees that will actually prevent that visual look-see through it, and especially in case if one or two die. And depending on the spacing that you put them, there's a tendency for the lower branches to die off anyway, and you'll get a crown of vegetation and a lot less on the base. But with respect to the actual sight lines that you've looked at tonight, I think so much depends on whether or not it's appropriate to cut the vegetation to the lines they have shown without knowing what the impacts will be on that runoff, because I think it's going to be substantial. So,
Personally, I look at them as two, I appreciate your comment. I look at them as two distinct issues, in that if anything was to go there, from my personal perspective, is that I don't want anyone to ever see it, ever. And if we can satisfy that, then we go look at water table issues and make sure that those get addressed.
Something we should be concerned about is, once, say, if they did cap that top of that hill, if this happened, say the vegetation disappeared, whatever row you have for tall standing trees, they're gonna be just toppling over. They're not gonna stay there. They're not gonna stay stable at all. You know, you disturb the canopy, because right now, they all exist with each other. You know, if you take the mass out the middle, like I said, it's not gonna, guarantee it won't stay there. I feel that way anyway. Seen that in the past.
Any other comments? Mr. Buckland, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Just that the existing vegetation and the quality and the growth is important to affect the blocking the sight lines as you intend to do with this permit. Couple of things. Understory is important in this construction because the understory, the vegetation that grows lower than the trees is what's going to block the person standing on the ground and looking across. And that isn't necessarily as thick as in all places as others. The other aspect of clearing is that it exposes some trees to wind shear effects, and as we found in the clearing of other properties, storms have an effect that can take down a bunch of the trees that are there as it exposes them. The other is that I understand Mr. Schultz's belief that the dense vegetation in the leaves in the upper story of the trees will prevent views from second stories, but you also have to realize in the winter that the leaves are going to be gone and the visibility will be much higher from the second story coming through there. And I agree with Charlie that the buffer design is going to be important for the protection of the views in those areas. And lastly, that it takes about 300 feet of trees to have any kind of effect on noise. So a buffer, a substantial buffer is necessary if you want to, if there are any noise issues involved with this design.
Mr. Schultz?
Mr. Buckland, just one question on a comment you made. There's really nothing that we can do in terms of, it's not our job to do design, but how do you mitigate wind shear?
You mitigate the effects of the wind by adding more depth to the buffer, so that you can allow some loss and still maintain the.
Yeah, which is counter to the whole project design at the moment.
I don't know what you mean by counter to the project
Well,
design.
they want as much space as possible. To give more depth, you have to shrink the
They
side.
want, for the size of the project, they want clearing enough on the side so that they don't get shadow effects on
Right.
the solar cells.
Okay. So we're going to have to deal with wind shear and loss of vegetation over time anyway.
That's right.
Any other comments? Rich, I'll close with, I agree with Mr. King wholeheartedly that 94 and 95 are going to be a big problem for me. And just a general comment, it makes me scratch my head when I think about we need to cut a lot of trees down and then come in and plant some new ones. It just rubs me wrong. So I would like you to carry that message back, if you would too, all right?
Understood?
I want to move off sightlines.
Okay. Then I guess going down the list that you had mentioned earlier, I guess while we're talking about trees, I guess that maybe we can discuss the one remaining waiver that we're asking for, which is one of the regulations in your site plan review regulations, your site plan review requirements. It's not in your solar bylaw or anything related to that. It's part of your typical site plan review requirements for drawings to show all trees that are 18-inch in diameter on the site plan. That's basically an 18-inch tree measured at breast height. And this site being, over 40 acres and being fully wooded, fully treed, we felt that it would be quite a demanding and, if not impossible, task to be able to survey every single one of those type of trees and show them on a site plan clearly. And we felt that requesting a waiver was appropriate, considering the fact that I guess we questioned what the purpose of showing all those trees would be at this point. It's not like we have a site plan or roadway that if there's a cluster of some trees of that size that you can design the roadway around it, or maybe preserve some trees in the middle of the site that are clustered together as a grove of some sort. But in this instance, being a solar project, we're following your bylaw, which basically allows us to do the minimum amount of clearing that allows for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the solar facility. And that's what we show on our plans. So if there are trees that are 18 inches in diameter within that area, they're going to be cut. If there's trees outside our limited clearing that are 18 inches in diameter, those are going to stay. And it's as simple as that, and we can't understand the need to show it on a set of plans where exactly each and every one of those trees are. So we felt that that a waiver would be something the applicant would like to request to not have to show those, knowing, as everybody knows, that the site is fully wooded and there are a lot of trees on the site.
I'll just make one comment. I've been researching a bit, and I don't know what I'd do with the data if I had it for a project that's going to clear 23.1 acres of land. If I knew there were X amount of 18-inch trees in that clearing project, I don't know what I'd do with that. So personally, it is in our bylaws. We do have to do it. Mr. Buckland, I would guess that you have an answer to my concern.
The size of the trees are the value of the clearing, the value of the wood that is cleared from the site.
Mm-hmm.
And you have obtained impact fees from the harvesting of wood on properties. That would be a key to figuring out what the harvest potential of this is as well.
Wouldn't it be true, though, that doing those measurements would be a lot easier after the cutting occurred?
It probably would while you're cutting them to make the choice about the size. But if you want to get to an agreement on what the value of the wood would be, you'd have to do some kind of survey. It may not be going out and identifying each individual tree, but doing a survey to know what the stand of wood is valued at.
Okay. Mr. Schultz?
Mr. Buckland, could you repeat again? Does the town get a fee for the value of the wood? I didn't hear you completely.
In recent projects by Borrego on Tohonet, the town received mitigation money for the value of the trees that were cut from those properties.
Borrego gave it $80,000 to the town. But that was a condition that was offered by them and accepted by them. It's certainly not part of our bylaws. Anyone have any comment on the tree inventory?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, in earlier conversations with the applicant, we've already broached that subject, and that he agreed that they would give the lumber money to the town as part of the agreement. But I still think, with the amount of concern and controversy of this project. I don't know personally if I would be of the mind to grant any waivers.
Mr. Baptiste?
I kind of agree with Mr. King. No waivers. You know, if they want it, let them fight for it.
Mr. Schultz?
I'm not perhaps as hardline as my fellow board members, but I do understand the need for getting evaluation and perhaps seeking compensate, or
Sure.
compensation is not the right word, or perhaps the best word. The other thing for some kind of inventory, I think other projects in other towns have gotten offsets by setting aside other areas and other plantings and preserving other areas that the applicant could perhaps do. So offsets is a need for the inventory to establish either offsets or valuations. So not a complete waiver.
Mr. Corbett?
None at this time.
Pardon me?
None.
I'll just,
I'm sorry, no comment.
but I would ask you the question, would you be, what's the right way to say it? Mr. King and Mr. Baptiste have indicated that they would not be in favor of granting a waiver. I've indicated I felt that a representative sample may be appropriate. I think Mr. Schultz has indicated the same. We haven't got into specifics or terms of that, and I guess I'm putting you on a spot and asking you where your head's at.
I would deny the waiver.
Okay, that being said, I don't know, from a process point of view, can we actually execute a vote during a public hearing?
You can't grant a waiver anyway. It's part of the zoning bylaw, so the only one that can do that is the ZBA.
I think, and we have discussed this, I think that we can, what we could do is grant a technique to how the inventory is done, whether it be by sample or by 100%. And what I'm hearing is from Michael, and Michael is 100% and 100%. So, and I'm hearing that from you as well. So we will have a vote at some point as to the technique to measure, if you will, Charlie. And we'll do that tonight. I don't know, can I do it during a public hearing?
You can.
So,
Can I just make a comment, Mr. Chairman, about this? I don't remember exactly when this requirement came in to determine the number of trees on a site that are 18 inches in diameter and greater. Clearly, there was a reason for it, to put it in there, and something that the town voted that they wanted to have. An 18-inch tree, 4 feet off the ground, is a pretty good-sized tree. To not at least make the attempt to walk through the site and to make some sort of a cursory determination whether or not there is a large number of them or whether there's just a few, I think leaves the question wide open. And at least some evidence should be presented that they have made some effort to determine if there are a cluster of those trees, whether they're dispersed indiscriminately throughout the site, how many there might be. Again, an 18-inch diameter white pine or an oak, if it happens to be, that's a big tree. It's been there for a long time. And I think the town, in its wisdom, determined that there was some value to knowing where those were and what impact it would have in removing them from a site. And bearing that in mind, if it turns out that there was, say, a cluster of these larger trees that were in an area, maybe it suggests that that cluster should be saved and the area encompassing them should not be cut. But to not make some sort of an effort to at least determine if in fact they're there, I think is asking you to go too far, too much.
Yeah, you make a compelling argument, Mr. Rowley. So, what I'd like to do,
Can I interject a little bit?
Sure.
Just make some comments, I guess. I understand the concern that everyone has, and I understand that, I guess the main purpose is to establish some value of the tree cutting for some type of a mitigation fee that would come in place.
but Mr. Rowley just identified another value as well, and that would be to identify clusters that may be missed in a sampling technique.
But, okay, and one of the things, I mean, an 18-inch diameter tree is basically about 6 inches across or so.
No, it's from side to side at 18 inches, that's diameter. So you can
Yeah,
measure the
that's like in
circumference divided by
circumference.
pi, and if you get 18 plus,
So,
that's it.
but I guess
Big tree.
in looking at the site plan, there's probably 20 acres of land that are in the swamp on the north end of the side. And to be able to accurately show those trees on a site plan, when there's no clearing or no work ever proposed in that, it's basically in the middle of a wetland,
Well,
seems
we're
like a
talking-
wasted effort in terms of the project's funding. And a large effort on, a surveyor's part to locate those trees. So I'm sure the applicant would be willing to consider some representative samples throughout the site. But to have to locate every single 18-inch diameter tree in areas that are well beyond the project limits, to me, seems like a real waste of money.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't suggesting that at all.
I'm sorry?
The
I wasn't
requirement,
suggesting there at all. I'm talking about the area that's being proposed to be cut.
Talking about the
Be cut.
area,
I'm not suggesting that they locate every tree on the portion of the site that's going to not be untouched. It doesn't make any sense.
no, it's only for the area to be cleared.
Right, right.
That's not how your bylaws written, but that's fine. We'll accept that. But
Let's check real quick.
It doesn't, it says on the property, I believe, but it doesn't make any sense to go out and locate large trees on a portion that isn't even a part of the activity. If it's there, fine. If it's not, fine.
I agree. I would suggest 100% inventory on the area proposed to be cut.
Say again, Mike?
I would suggest a 100% inventory on the area that's proposed to be cut.
Rich, I think Rich is right. This is a requirement in Chapter 15 of our zoning bylaws in Section 1532. It has nothing to do with solar. It has nothing to do with clear cutting. It has only to do with projects that are 30 acres or greater, or have 8 or more parking spots, or specifically call out for a site plan review per the use tables, which solar farms in residential areas do. But it says all plans are to include but not be limited to the following: existing natural resources, individual trees 18 inches diameter or over. It doesn't talk to if that's only for the property, for the entire property itself, or just for the project area within that property. It's unclear. It's a dilemma. Rich, I think it should be clear to you, though, that at least 3 of the 5 board members here are going to insist on 100% inventory, whether it be the whole lot or the cleared area.
Yeah, I understand that, yep.
There's been a dilemma here.
Mr. Swenson, I have a question. I'm trying to frame my question. I don't know that we need to push this issue at this point,
That's kind of where my head's at.
because I believe most of us feel that the hydrogeological survey will raise far more issues and concerns than the tree inventory. And I think if we get past the hydrogeologic study and it looks favorable, then I think there's time then still to discuss the tree inventory, which something's going to have to be done, I think. And
So-
per what Mr. Rowley says, we can't grant a waiver anyway.
It would never be, our goal to quote, grant a waiver. It would be to come up with a measurement technique that we're all comfortable with. But, that being said, I think the right thing to do right now is table this. I think, Rich, you've heard the message loud and clear where this board stands.
Yes.
Whether it's 44 acres or 26 acres, we'll figure out later. But it will be 100% inventory, I'm sure, when we do have the vote, but we will table it for now. Acceptable?
Mm-hmm. Acceptable.
Michael, Beck, you okay?
Yep.
Okay? Want to talk about ancient ways?
Oh, sure, I guess that was next on the list. So, the applicants have had title searches done for both parcels that make up the locus of the site. And none of those title reports or title searches I had identified at any records of ancient ways. Our research at the Registry of Deeds and doing surveys didn't identify any records of ancient ways on the site. We've also reviewed the Mass Cultural Resources Information System, and there wasn't anything identified in those areas also. So again, it's not only just us looking at the site, but we just don't see if we don't have any records of any ancient ways on the site. Obviously, there's paths and ATV trails and other things that have been out there for a while, but we haven't found any record of any ancient way that travels through or on the site or through it. So, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, a question for the applicant. Did the applicant review the documentation provided by Mr. Untala?
I do not know.
That's a question I'm directing at the
Oh,
applicant.
I'm sorry, yes. Do you know there was documentation submitted?
I haven't seen any of that information now.
It's on the
I don't-
website, Mr. Chairman, I believe.
So what was that?
There was some diagrams that showed some pathways
And some reference documentation going back to the 30s, I think. I'm doing that from memory.
Sure.
And also, there was part of the application process that was marked as not applicable, which was historical studies and historical commission. I'm not getting that. Mr. Buckland, you know what section of the application I'm talking about that was checked as not applicable for historical studies?
They decided against, they figured there weren't any historical studies that were done.
Well, yeah, so would that be irrelevant?
That would be if there is documentation.
Okay.
So,
That's information that was submitted to the board or to the town?
Yes.
I think, if I may, the question at hand is there any evidence of an ancient way there that needs to be considered? And I've looked at the material that's been provided. I've looked at the maps, and I've looked at the applicant's data, and I don't see any myself. I think that we as a board would welcome anybody in our community or anybody in our state or anybody in our world that could come and show us evidence that that there is something there that we need to take into consideration. Right now, I haven't seen it, and I believe the applicant has done a level of due diligence which is admirable, if you will, the research that's gone on, but like I say, I haven't seen any hard evidence, and that's going to be the key. So.
I mean, we'll be glad to take a look at that information further. I mean, I wasn't aware of it until just now, so.
I think Mr. Shanahan may be, but that's fine. If you, I'm assuming you have access to our repository of documents for this project on the Wareham Planning Board site?
Yes.
All right. You want to continue this discussion, Carl? Not, I'll move on to noise.
I will definitely do that, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as the next item, noise specifications, what the applicant has hired a firm that specializes in sound and noise analysis, HMMH, and they are right now in the process of doing a site-specific noise study. There's nothing to report for that study for today. It's underway right now. I believe they were making some on-site measurements, and then they'll be continuing to do their analysis in the coming weeks. But they have hired a specialist, a company that specializes in noise and acoustic analysis like this, and they'll be providing a study that will hopefully address any concerns that you have.
Comments? I have a comment in mind if I go. In looking at the schematic, I'm trying to pull it up right now, and looking at the equipment specification list, my comments are that we need more data in the application. There is the panel specification is in here. Bear with me, the string inverter is in the site plan application, but that is it, and none of those specifications have any noise parameters with them. So I just want to make sure, I want to get to this, let me just find the schematic, because I know there's HVAC equipment, there's step-up transformers, there's batteries, there's all kinds of other equipment that isn't listed in the application. So my only comment is to please go through the schematic, make sure that all the equipment that does have a noise factor is included in the report, and that we have the specifications from the manufacturer about that.
Most definitely, yep. We will make sure that that's included in the noise study and in just a submittal of supplemental material for the application.
Okay, great. Better put a tab on that page, huh? Comments, questions, Mr. Schultz, on the noise thing, Michael?
No.
Michael? I think we've gone through all the open action items that we had in our communication. As Mr. Rowley and Mr. Schultz have indicated, we're anxious to get moving on the hydrogeologist proposal, the negotiations between the applicant and them, making sure we're all on the same page. Have you got a confirmation from Mr. Price and/or Mr. Shanahan about their availability for the 27th?
They're both available then.
So I think it would be important that we do that in face-to-face. Do you think that they could be here? physically in this?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that will be the plan. If you could, Rich, if you could make sure to carry that back.
Definitely, yep.
We've covered a lot of stuff so far tonight. Before I open the public aspect of the hearing, Mr. Schultz, any last comments? Mr. Corbett? Mr. Baptiste? No. Mr. King?
None.
All right. Okay, we will now open the floor to the public to come and address the board. Please remember that all questions need to go through the chair. Thank you. Who's first? How did I know that?
I've been quiet for 2 weeks now.
Miss Wertz, how are you?
I'm a lot better than I was last week, thank you.
I know you had a trying week, so I'm glad to see you back.
Thank you. I just have a question in the noise area, in that not only am I interested in what the data sheets show, I'm interested in the count of units that we have. How many string inverters are there? Central inverters as well. When I looked at that document, it talked about storage units. It never talked about batteries or transformers, et cetera. And so are we talking what exactly are in the storage units, and is there one storage unit, 5 storage units, whatever there is? And then also considering in the noise area the harmonics caused by each type of unit. So that's it. I'll be quiet again for 2 more weeks.
So, Rich, I would ask that you take ownership of that question, take it back to your consultant who's helping, and make sure that those are valid issues and concerns.
Definitely, yep. I've got my notes, yep.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wertz. Anyone else? Hello, Kathy.
Hi there, Kathy Pappalardo, resident of Fairing Hill Road, a butter and also steward of the Fairing Hill Conservation Land. And to the chairman, or through the chairman, I would question planting arborvitaes. That's deer candy. And there are plenty of deer on Fairing Hill Road. And Mr. Rowley's comment about whatever the plantings to put them staggered and deep is true. We all can see the solar panels very clearly that stick out like a sore thumb on Toby Road with one skinny row of little teeny trees that are dying. I would rethink arborvitae, try to get a mix. If you're going to do plantings in there, native plantings that will hold up whether there's drought or not, and that will be replaced if they die, but not put all of one. Years ago, towns learned that when you plant all elm trees and Dutch elm disease you lose your downtowns. So towns since then have learned, never plant one species, break it up. So I would very much caution against doing arborvitae there. The sight line is critical, and I would share the concerns that Mr. King has about 2 of those houses on Fairing Hill Road with not having it blocked from them, as well as their concerns for the water. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. My
Who
name is
are
Kevin
you?
Mahalik. I'm 163 Squirrel Island Road, opposite side of the street, but unfortunately where my house resides is the lowest in elevation in this whole area. My biggest concern is the hydrology of it. Changing this wooded forest to a prairie is going to greatly impact the runoff that I see down at my elevation where my property sits. It seems inappropriate site selection to be taking a densely forested area and trying to clear cut it. There are much better places in our town with all of the sand pits available, and I would encourage for future board applications that maybe they look at these as opposed to clear cutting. It should be something that's done further before this point in the process.
And I'm sorry, Where exactly is your property at?
Squirrel Island Road, it's on the opposite side
Yeah.
of Ferring Hill.
Can you tell me your number? Just
163.
160, because I just want to go look at a map. all
Yeah,
right?
sure.
All right, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Nancy, go.
Nancy McHale, Ferring Hill Road, steward of the Ferring Hill Conservation Area, that is the town-owned property. I am disturbed that none of the sightlines were from that Ferring Hill property, from the Ferring Hill Conservation Area. Because I know in that back corner,
Would you mind just pointing out where you're
I
talking?
will be delighted to point that out. In this particular area, the understory here is not very dense in most cases.
You get back to a mic now. Thank you. I wanted to make sure we knew what you were.
Yep, the understory in that area is not very dense. And you would be looking up at whatever panels are 50 feet away. Okay, so
From where, though, Nancy?
from the conservation area, if indeed you were back in there. There may or may not be trails right there right now. I know as the steward, Kathy and I are back in there more than most people are, but it is still town property, and we need to look out for that sight line as well. And I would echo the native plants necessary to maintain their longevity, and hopefully something that would also be food for whatever animals manage to survive this. The noise. Now, we all know that the town population doubles in the summer, and there's a lot of noise, vehicular traffic noise, that is created from the summer residents down Blackmore Pond Road area. And I would just ask that that be factored in and not taken as that this is the sound of that area or the noise level of that area all the time.
I'm struggling.
It's much quieter in the winter than it is right now, while all the
I
suburb residents are
got
around
it.
with the traffic.
I anticipate that if I may,
Yeah,
I anticipate that the report would focus on from the solar farm outward, which I'm not sure would it really matter what time of year it was and the amount of vehicle traffic there was?
I don't know how noise studies are done.
Your point is noted, though.
And just making the notation. And I would like to thank the board for their considerations of all of these questions and all of their pertinent comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Lintela, 15 Squirrel Island Road. I live right behind the residence on Ferring Hill. Yeah, I'd like to thank the board too, because you guys, you're caught between a rock and a hard place at times with all these, a lot of important concerns and questions that are being asked. There have been countless meetings on solar field proposals, and there have been countless objections by residents, environmental organizations, who have brought forth good, reasonable, and sound researched information as to why they should not be built in sensitive environmental areas and residential neighborhoods, especially this one on Ferring Hill Road. On July 20th, Mr. Charles Rowley, consulting engineer for the town of Wareham, submitted a thorough peer review on the Ferring Hill Solar Project to the Planning Board. And I'm sure by now we have all read Mr. Rowley's report and its recommendations very carefully. Of the 6 recommendations mentioned, 4 of them concern stormwater runoff. And this is the big issue, where that water is going to go when it's coming down. When I look at the map over here to the right,
And please, if there's any information you can add, Rick, about those basins, the water basins. The water that's coming down, can you just mention, what is the function of those basins exactly that I'm seeing on the map that are in blue?
Sure, should I?
Can I,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Eric,
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Are you comfortable in taking the question, Rich?
Definitely, yeah, yeah. Well, part of the stormwater analysis that we do is to analyze how much water is running off the site under existing conditions, like in present conditions, like right now. And then we'll analyze that same area only after it's developed. So when we remove trees, add gravel, other things like that, it changes the amount of runoff that comes off of the site. And so those basins are part of the design to help mitigate any increase in runoff off the site. They would basically have a storage capability, a certain amount of storage in them that the water would remain in those basins after a storm and then released through either an overflow spillway or through a smaller diameter pipe, and some infiltration, and just allow that water to be released off the site or to the groundwater basically at the same rate that's happening under current conditions. So there's a whole type of hydraulic analysis and that goes into that. But essentially, it's the basins store water and release it off at a smaller rate than what's being released from the site now.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's good. So I have a solar field behind my place that has one of these kind of catch basins. And it's where I'm at, let's say relatively flat, but that catch basin, and it's not all that deep, just on normal storms, depending on the year, especially spring, it overflows. And all that water comes behind my place and floods all of that place out. And that's created an issue on Squirrel Island Road. This is on the incline. This is on a hill. And those catch basins, we just had that storm. Well, I did it come through. How many inches of water fell in that short amount of time? And that water that came through my place. So that's just, how many of those are going to happen? But normal water coming down off that hill, off those panels, that's a scary situation. I'm extremely concerned what's going to happen. That Fairing Hill is going to become a river. That's just my opinion, but the more we look at that and the way the weather's going right now, and not even talking about climate change, that's coming. That's a whole nother ballgame. But just under normal conditions and what we've already experienced, the amount of water we've got, that stuff coming down the hill, look out, Charlie, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Mr. Buckland, do you see anyone on Zoom?
No hands up.
Okay. Anyone else in the general audience here? Okay, I would accept a motion to continue the public hearing on the Fairing Hill Road Solar Project to September 27th.
So moved.
Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing none, call for a vote, and since we are hybrid, I'll call for a roll call. I don't know, do I have to do roll call for hybrid? Ken, do you know? What?
No, you don't, because you're live.
Okay, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0-0. That was a motion by Michael King and a second by Sam Corbett, and the vote was 5-0-0. Rich will need the applicant to drop an email note asking for the continuation of the public hearing to September 27th, sent to
Okay.
Mr. Buckland.
Okay?
I think we are done with the Fairing Hill Road topic for tonight. Maybe not. I do want to come, Mr. Rowley, you have any final comments you'd like to make, Mr. Buckland?
No, we have a form here that you fill out. If it's not this, we can extend the hearing.
Okay. We will close that down. I lost my agenda. Thank you. Okay, we have no new public hearings. That was the last of our continued public hearings. Does the audience have any public comment on the master plan updates or new initiatives? Mr. Schultz.
I want to reiterate my comment from earlier on the rain water car wash project, that this points out the need for us to take action on strategy 3 for the under land use, for design aesthetic. And I suggest at our next workshop or some future workshop, we talk about how we move forward on that.
I would, I'm 100% behind you. I'd ask you to take the lead on that discussion. Would you be willing to do that?
Sure.
Thank you.
You need a manual with this one. Manual would have a ball with this one.
Okay, any other business? Discussion on upcoming workshop. We have a workshop meeting which will be 100% Zoom. Next Monday, Mr. Buckland, I will be in touch with you to schedule the Zoom. I have met with Mr. Rowley, I have met with Mr. Buckland. I took an action item from our last workshop to look at site plan review and how we as a group can become more familiar with the purpose, the process, the procedures and whatnot. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, there's a lot of things in here which are very confusing. So, what I'd like to propose is next week at our workshop that we as a group take a look at sections, and I'll send a note to everyone, section 1510 in its entirety, which is only half a page, its purpose. Because we're going to discuss what our bylaws say about the purpose of site plan review and all make sure we're on the same page and understand what that purpose is. We're going to talk about 1520 and applicability. And we're going to talk about, if with your approval, we're going to talk about, damn it, Charlie, it's the same one. 1565.3 public hearings. And who is the authority running these things? Because if you read it 5 times, you might figure it out and understand what it's going. But I think it's a good spot for us to get our head around this. And at the same time, I fully expect we're going to come up with some recommendations for changing to the wording to make it clear, because I think what we see here is the very, very well-intentioned efforts of an evolving and rotating planning board with different people, with different definitions and different goals. And we have an opportunity to work with the ZBA and the Director of Planning and Development and ourselves to make this a little readable, because as I mentioned last time, I find contradictory stuff here. So,
What board does what?
yeah.
Who does what?
Yeah, agreed. And I think that if we focus on those 3, and maybe I'll have material available on other ones, but I do want to keep these workshops to just an hour. But we can go through here and get all on the same page at a high level. Mr. Rowley, my sound reasonable to you? And I want people to know that Charlie answers a lot of questions for me during the weeks, and I appreciate it very much. So
I'm not sure what he's paid, but it's not enough what he does.
yeah. Discussion and possible vote, amendment of subdivision rules and regulations. I did forward to you all a marked up copy of our existing subdivision rules and regulations that Mr. Rowley has been working on for several years. And the version I sent to you is the latest and greatest iteration of what he's done. Ken, you included this. Did you have a specific goal in mind?
Yes, along with Charlie's comments, I had marked up the previous version as well for changes in the subdivision rules and regulations. There's also an opportunity to add in some criteria that apply to the MS4 EPA program for stormwater management. We've been adding in to general bylaws and zoning bylaws references to MS4 requirements, and have been trying to meet the continuing requirements of change that the EPA is looking for in the program for the town to apply to the issue of stormwater runoff in the community.
Do we have a deadline?
We have a deadline every year. Each year we are required to add in additional information and changes in the programs to address the issues that EPA has identified as requiring action by the town. I think in this case, a good portion of it is in terms of as-built plans, operation and maintenance of the systems, and testing and post-construction, just general post-construction management of the stormwater systems.
What would you, Carl, please? Yeah, I was just going to say, so
I think there's a couple
this sounds like FEMA to me.
Yeah, something like that. Only they've already audited the town. EPA came around and wrote us a harsh letter about where we were in the process. This is something they're trying to use as an example for other towns to try to keep all the towns in line to improve their local programs. It's something that I question as to whether or not there's the level of need required when we have so many other issues that affect the town. But in any case, it's something that we're impacted by, and we have to follow through or be subject to action by the federal government.
Mr. Schultz?
The changes suggested by Mr. Buckland and Mr. Rowley, do they have to be approved by a town meeting?
No, they do not.
They do not. So we don't have to worry about the timing for the fall town meeting. We can...
Just for the public's edification, and this is something that Charlie educated me on and that Ken just confirmed, that this board can make changes to the Wareham rules and regulations regarding subdivisions on our own. So...
However, one thing you should note, you should remember as well, is that everything you put in there, the town has to do as well for all new road construction that they do. So if you want to have some standards applied to private road development, it's going to apply to every public road that's built as well.
So regarding the EPA and the requirements that they're putting on us and the pressure they're putting you under for ignoring it as long as we have, what's our next step? I mean, I guarantee you this board's not going to approve anything unless we have a pretty good handle on what it is. And right now, no one does.
Yeah, I think what I do is include the sections that in the draft that you consider in a public hearing. This is along with the changes that Charlie has recommended as well, too.
Can we do them all at once?
Do them all at once and just change the subdivision rules and regulations, hold the hearing, and then file it with the town clerk as they're required by state law.
This board willing to take this on as a continuing action item to get through until we get it done? How long do you think it would take?
I think it'll probably take 4 meetings. And then you can order up a public hearing and present it to the public and see what the result is.
Add it on and get it done?
Yeah.
Mr. Baptiste, okay? All right. We're going to look to you for guidance on the EPA stuff. Charlie, we're going to look to you as to rhyme and reason as to the changes you're proposing during these sessions.
Yeah. They'll go hand in hand, though. So I think just one thing that Ken mentioned was as-built plans. I've had this discussion when I was going through this with the town of Mashpee, because they had a consultant come in and take the MS4 regulations, and they went through the zoning bylaw and the planning board rules and regulations to see what the differences were and where they should have been upgraded. And one of the things that I asked them about was as-built plans. because,
I'm going to interrupt you because I'm not clear that I understand the definition of an as-built plan.
well, an as-built is of the site conditions, do they match the plan that was actually approved by the town? For example, do the drainage structures and so forth, are they generally where they're supposed to be? Are the elevations the same? Are the number of plantings the same? Is the runoff going in the direction that it's supposed to according to the plan? That type of thing. We do the same thing here that we did in Mashpee, and that's to require a site inspection as the construction is underway. And it's not just me, it would be anybody that comes after me that would take the existing plans, compare the construction that's being done to that existing plan, and note where there might be some adjustments. I don't think we're talking about a tenth of a foot or, a 100th of a foot. I mean, that's silly. But to suggest that, okay, the stormwater was supposed to go over here, but it goes over there, that's a change that would obviously be picked up. So the question is as-built plans necessary if the inspection procedures are sufficient and complete enough to where it can be stated to the board that, yeah, this has been done in compliance with the plan that was approved. In the back end of the proposal, which I had suggested for subdivision review, is an inspection proposal that I put together, just listing the general things that I, as an engineer, look for or go through in the inspection procedure, so that when you get through with it, you know that it's been done accordingly. Now, that doesn't suggest that everything goes to Hoyle, as you well know. But for the most part, that's the way it gets done. So the question is, if Ken could, do you have a copy of that MS4 letter that states where we're deficient? That we could sort of compare apples to oranges and
No,
see
the
where we
letter
are?
isn't specific as to where we're deficient. It just says we are deficient and expects us
But
to
it doesn't tell
go-
us where?
It doesn't tell us where, no. It says that
That's helpful.
we find conformance with the regulations.
Is there some general document that we can
There are
go?
general documents on the MS4 program and the requirements, and the yearly report that we have to file, and the one is due September 30th, lists out certain actions that they expect the town to take
Okay, could we
in this
could we
last
see
year
that?
for that purpose.
Okay, could we see that? So that we
Good.
get an idea? One of the things that is pertinent to it, to just as what Ken says, in the rules and regulations that you promulgate for subdivision control, you cannot require an applicant to do more than what the town does in the general area in which you're doing the development. For example, if you're doing a project off of High Street, we know High Street's got sidewalks on both sides, it's got curb, trees. You could require that kind of detail in a development that's in that same general area. But if you're talking about Squirrel Island Road, you're not necessarily going to do that. But you cannot go above and beyond the standard regulations that the town uses for its own construction. That's very, very well stated in Chapter 41. So, just got to bear that in mind.
Okay, so, you need to educate us, Ken.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll put together a program to lay out the steps you take to revise the subdivision rules and regulations, what content you'll include, and what I expect that you can be able to do in the next 4 meetings and get it done.
Okay. We're under any other business discussion. Can I add an element in here? Is that okay? It's, Ken, I want to talk about our meeting today. I'm trying to figure out where to properly put this into the agenda.
You can do it there, that's fine.
Pardon me?
You can do it there. You can do it under new business, anything that, for topics that the chairman did not reasonably anticipate would be discussed.
All right. Staff report, results of A&R creating an illegal zoning status.
Yeah, this is a lesson learned, but not anything that the planning board did wrong. You followed the regulations as appropriate to, for an A&R subdivision. It happened at 504 Main Street. If you remember, this is the nice historic building that was just recently renovated. They have a carriage house in the back.
The real L-shaped lot,
And they did the L-shaped lot to,
Brook Road?
so Stony Brook Road would be the frontage and would carry the new development on there. What happened was the building commissioner, when he reviewed the status of the lots that were being included there, noted that the carriage house was a residential unit. So there were 2 residential units on that property, in which case what happened is the requirements for zoning and frontage are different in the MR30 district for 2 residential units. It's 180 and 45,000 square feet, not 30. So the lot that was created with those 2 units on there was not a legal lot. It creates a nonconformity, not a nonconformity. The town creates nonconformities when it changes zoning on existing development. But they create an illegal situation when they change things that aren't kosher. So it's problematic at this point because there's a sale of the new lot that was created, and there's an illegal condition that requires a variance, which would be impossible, presumably, to get a hardship because it's self-inflicted.
I studied that situation. Your previous administrator was teaching me all about those self-inflicted. No relief from self-inflicted wounds.
That's right.
So is there an action on this board at this point?
No, this board does not have to require to take any action at this time.
That's good news for you.
I told you.
Yeah, I know somebody very happy about that news. Okay, anything else on that?
No, that's all.
Okay, under new business, regarding special permit enforcement and violations, I met with Mr. Buckland, Mr. Sullivan, and Mr. Requena today. And I want to keep this discussion for this meeting at a high level, and I'm going to get to the bottom line. The bottom line is on our workshop in October, which is 5 weeks from now, Mr. Requena will come attend and help us understand violations and enforcement of special permits and what our roles are. That being said, I think it's very important that this board know that when we discussed some recent cases, we didn't understand ourselves how this works. And I know I personally made some statements that put Mr. Requena in a very bad light, and I was wrong about that. I feel bad about that. I've apologized to him, to his face, and committed to him that we will come up with a mechanism of communication between his organization and the Building Inspectional Services and the Planning Board so that we understand how we should deal with complaints that come to us regarding permits that we have granted. And that happens, and people come to us and ask us to enforce, and we took on that task, and we shouldn't have done that. So to that end, immediately, I am proposing, I have agreed with David that this is what we'll do with your consent, that when a complaint comes to us about a permit that we've granted and issues around it in terms of violations and/or enforcement, that our very first step that we will take, and our only step we will take, is to reach out to him and with the information that we have, the details that we know, and come up with a next step. Who owns what, who's going to do what roles that we have. That way we can be constantly informed of the status of the permits that we're giving. And when there are issues, that we will have a dialogue and a communication channel with inspectional services to make sure that they're getting resolved. I think that's all I have to say. Is there any comment or question there? It was a very productive meeting.
That sounds reasonable. As long as, that's what it's all about, is communication. I think we were lacking communication in the past.
Okay?
Excellent.
All right. Future meeting is, regular meeting on September 27th, workshop on the September 20th. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Michael King to adjourn, second by Sam Cormit. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, Wareham.